got this new trail riding tape. Want to watch it before we go riding?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, what a great place to ride here. Oh, my name's Gary Bailey, and I'd like to spend the next hour with you and give you a lot of tips on trail riding. Along with me will be David Bailey and Johnny O'Mara. We're going to show you some uphills, some downhills, jumping across ditches, climbing out of ditches, just about everything you'd possibly want to know that'll help you when you're out there trail riding. And at the end of this tape, we're going to have Johnny and David do some of the most unbelievable things you've probably ever seen on a motorcycle. So be ready for this one, and remember, don't try these things you're going to see them doing unless you're a very experienced rider, and then I suggest you be very careful.
Before Johnny and David show us some trail riding tips, what I want to do is take a minute and talk about proper riding position. What is proper riding position, and why is it the proper riding position? Always keep your head located over the front end of the motorcycle. Over the front end of the motorcycle, that means over the handlebars, over the triple clamps, so far forward that you can see your front number plate whenever you're riding. Your arms should be placed upward. They should run upwards at about a 30 to a 45 degree angle. Your elbows should be up as well as out away from your body. In case the front end happens to catch a rut or some problem out on the trail when you're riding, tries to jerk the handlebars out of your hand, you're going to have better control. You also have better leverage with your arms up and out away from your body. You have 4 points on the motorcycle that are good leverage points. You have the right handlebar, the left handlebar, the right peg, and the left peg. Learn to move around more on the motorcycle. Be relaxed as you possibly can whenever you're riding, and use those 4 points, whether you're on the ground or whether you're in the air, to be able to control the motorcycle better. Proper throttle grip is really important. Make sure when you accelerate that your elbow doesn't drop down lower than your wrist whenever you turn the throttle on. In order to keep that from happening, you can do one of two things. Either you can readjust your hand occasionally when you get ready to accelerate, or with your elbows out away from you, it makes it very easy to be able to roll the throttle on and twist your wrist much like you were opening a doorknob rather than letting your wrist drop down. This is going to give you better control and allow you to work with the bike better at all times whenever you're riding. So remember, stay as loose as you possibly can whenever you're riding, and don't ride too far back on the back of the seat. It's a lot like riding a horse. It kicks and bucks like a horse does. Make sure that you don't ride on the very back side of the seat. You wouldn't mount a saddle on the back end of a horse. You don't ride on the back end of a motorcycle. Make sure you keep yourself well forward on the motorcycle to keep as much control as possible. And remember, that's a problemed area back there. Don't get back there and become a part of the problem. Stay forward. Let all of your troubles be behind you.
Well, so much for this. Let's get into watching Johnny and David do their thing out on the trails, talk about what they're doing and why they're doing it, which is hopefully going to help you whenever you get out and start riding.
Wheelies. You know, everybody likes to do wheelies, and I think learning to do wheelies is very important, particularly for a trail rider where he's got to loft over a lot of things. For instance, coming out of ditches, lofting over logs, getting up out of muddy crossings, and just doing wheelies in general. But what you want to learn to do is slow wheelies. That's the most important. Not horsepower wheelies, slow wheelies. How do you get the front end up? First of all, ride along slow, put on the rear brake, bring the bike to a complete stop. Then loft the front end. When you compress the front forks by stopping, they're going to compress, then they're going to rebound. Keep your throttle at about half throttle when you get ready to loft the front end of the motorcycle. Then be quick with your clutch. You're going to be using the rear brake the entire time. That's going to keep the bike from going over with you. You must bring the bike to a 45-degree angle. If you don't bring the bike up to a 45-degree angle at least, you are not going to be able to do a balanced wheelie. Learn to control your throttle, use your clutch, and use the rear brake the entire time that you're doing wheelies. Slow wheelies are the most important, not horsepower wheelies. How about this neat little trick? How about riding your front wheel along a bank with the rear wheel down at the bottom, the front wheel up on the top. This situation you get into when you got ruts out on the trail. You get into a situation sometimes when you're getting ready to go over a log and the wheels straddle. The trick, first of all, you must learn how to loft the front end by doing your wheelie. Keep your fingers on the clutch the entire time. Lean your weight toward the inside of the bank. Work the front wheel. Never let the front wheel get more than about 18 inches away from the ledge that you're riding on. Keep the front wheel working and point it in the direction of travel the whole time. Lean your weight to the inside. Keep the wheel turning as much as possible. It makes it a lot easier. If you stop the wheel, if you get the front wheel pointed too much up forward, that can become a problem for you. If you lean toward the outside, the bike's going to have a tendency to want to go off the side of the ledge. Be smooth with your power. Even try one-handers. This will really build up your confidence. How about proper riding position? You know, what is the proper riding position and why is it the proper riding position? The majority of the time that you're riding, you should keep your head over the front end of the motorcycle. Now, over the front end of the motorcycle is over the triple clamps. Now, that's most of the time, whether you're going on flat ground or you're going downhill or you're going uphill, it really doesn't make much difference. Your head is still located over the front end. Another good idea, keep 1 or 2 fingers on the clutch lever the whole time. Particularly whenever you're trail riding, you want to make sure that if you get in trouble, that you can get out of trouble quickly. Now, when you get ready to go off a drop-off, keep your head a little bit forward on the motorcycle. As you start up that uphill, make sure again you got your fingers on the clutch. Your head is still located over the front end of the motorcycle. It doesn't make any difference what size the rider is. It can be a mini bike rider, it can be an open class rider. Still the same body position applies. You have to have your head over the front end of the motorcycle in order to be able to control it. It's also important that you keep your arms out away from your body. Don't let your arms get tucked in too tight, because then if the front end catches something, tries to pull the bars out of your hand, you don't have the leverage to be able to control it. Again, keep your head over the handlebars the entire time that you're riding. That will give you the best control in all situations. The problem is when you're riding out in the woods, you come up on things very quickly, particularly if there's a lot of leaves on the ground. You can't see all the ruts, the tree roots, and all the problems that are there. Always keep yourself in a slight hunched over position. How you grip the throttle is also very important. Remember, holding your throttle, gripping a hold of it like you're opening up a doorknob. Don't let your arms run at a 90-degree angle of the handlebars. This will enable you to maneuver the motorcycle better when you're in tight situations. If you're getting in and out of trees, get close to a tree, that's not a problem. Lean away from the tree a little bit. Work yourself in and out of the trees. Stand up, you'll be able to maneuver the bike a little bit faster, a little bit easier than if you're sitting down. When you start up the hills, make sure that you don't get your weight too far on the back of the motorcycle, because it will tend to wheelie. If it tends to wheelie, you can use the rear brake to bring it down, but again, you must use your clutch so that you don't stall the motorcycle. Even when you're going downhill, don't lock up the rear wheel brake, don't lock up the front brake. Again, your head still stays over the front of the motorcycle, and you keep a slight bend in your arms the entire time that you're riding so that you can absorb any impact, particularly when you get to the bottom of that downhill. Now, when you got more wide open spaces and you don't have so many trees, you don't have as many problems or things to worry about running into, but you still must maneuver the motorcycle. Again, that hunched over position, weight well forward, arms slightly bent. Work the bike the entire time that you're riding. Don't just sit on the motorcycle. Don't try and hold the bike in a straight line. Continue to work it. You'll have much better control over the motorcycle. You'll be able to put it wherever you want it to go. Keep your fingers on the clutch. Remember, you might have to stop quickly in a particular situation, and if that happens, you don't want to stall the motorcycle. Slightly hunched over position. Remember, if you lock up the rear brake, the bike, particularly on a downhill, will have a tendency to want to go faster because it will pick up speed. You want to let the wheels work as though it was a tractor turning very slowly, and you want to keep the wheels turning the entire time. This will help you to go slower. When you start on the uphill, remember, there's a lot of different lines you're trying to pick. You're trying to maneuver in and out of things. Work the bike. Your arms should be very loose on the motorcycle. You should be working the bike back and forth the entire time. And again, on the uphill, keep your weight well over the front end of the motorcycle. You don't want it to wheelie. Don't let the RPMs get up too high. Don't spin the rear tire. Don't let the bike bog and fall out of the power band. Slip your clutch a little bit all the way up the hill. Don't give it full power. The bike will pull better. There'll be less chance of it wheeling, less chance of the tire spinning. Relax. Work the bike. Never let the RPMs get up too high. When you're on a real fast trail, it's the same type of thing as on the slower trails. Again, relax, let your arms stay out away from your body, work the bike. Whether it's an uphill or whether it's a downhill, keep that head forward. This body position is the position that you should be in 90% of the time when you're riding, whether you're standing or whether you're sitting. Fingers on the clutch, slightly hunched over, looking right ahead where you're going, keeping your head over the handlebars. The bike is going to hop, it's going to skip, it's going to swap. Don't try and stop it from doing those things. The bike must work in that manner. Let it work. If you're located in this neutral body position, the bike is going to work underneath you, and you're not going to have to fight the motorcycle at all. Hey, how about this one, your favorite uphill, covered with tree roots? Man, what you got to be careful of here is that you don't get too much power. You never make a radical acceleration change on an uphill with tree roots on it. You want to try and keep a real smooth power. Build as much power at the bottom of the hill as you possibly can so that you really kind of coast up that hill. If you try and build power going up the hill, what's going to happen is you're going to hit those tree roots. There's going to be no traction. You're going to lose all your forward momentum. The next thing you know, you're going to be laying on the ground. You get to the tree root and you try and accelerate. As soon as you try to accelerate, the back end hits it, the back end slides out, your feet end up off the foot pegs, and you find yourself in real trouble. Well, if you're thinking about riding some narrow ridges like these right here, where it drops off 30 and 40 feet on each side, where if you put your foot down, you're in big trouble because there's no place to put your foot, and you're going to fall off the side of this embankment, I suggest that you try it in some place a little bit easier, like on some trails where it's not quite so far down, maybe in some rain ruts, where you can ride along and learn how to practice keeping your feet up the entire time and have good control over the motorcycle. It's real important that you work your bike a lot when you're riding through this stuff. Really keep your head over the front end of the motorcycle and keep good control over the front wheel so that you put the bike exactly where you want it to go the entire time. Make sure your arms nor your legs are too stiff. Again, your head should stay forward over the motorcycle, and you should always keep a finger on the clutch the entire time. Be looking ahead, know exactly where you want to go. If you have a little lip that you're coming off and you want to swing the back end around, as the suspension rebounds and it kicks the back end up, hop the back end around to the side just a little bit by using your legs and your hips to help throw the motorcycle around. It'll help set you up for the next section and get you lined up a little bit better. Thinking about climbing some logs, going over some tree roots? Give you a couple little tips about it. First of all, make sure that you loft the front end. Don't run it straight into the tree root, otherwise it's going to compress the forks and want to kick the back end up bad. You may not even get over it if it's too high. You want to loft the front wheel, set it over the top. You can let the front wheel touch right into the log, or you can wheelie just over it a little bit. If you wheelie all the way over it, it's going to have a tendency to kick the back end real high. If you let the front end touch where it's closer to the ground, it won't throw the front end down nearly as hard. You want to remember to squat down, keep your head forward, keep your finger on the clutch, because you're going to use your clutch to loft the front end of the motorcycle, just like when you were doing the wheelie. You loft the front end. As you loft the front end, it comes up, the back end impacts into it. When the back end impacts and it kicks forward, be sure to move your weight forward at the same time. Don't let it throw you forward. Don't let it pull you over the handlebars. Be careful about hitting a tree root at an angle. You want to try and hit them as straight on as possible, or you could be looking something like this. Now this technique is a whole lot like lofting over those logs. The only difference is you're going to have to loft the front end a whole lot higher. You know, it's surprising how many things you have to use the clutch for to be able to do them successfully and to be able to do them smooth. And a lot of trail riders don't use their clutch at all. You should keep your fingers on the clutch, though, the entire time that you're riding. In order to do that wheelie, it's important that you use your clutch to help loft the front end of the motorcycle. Get it up as high as the top of the bank. You don't have to have it much higher, just so it sits up on the top. Then as it kicks out, move your body weight forward. Get it away from the back end of the motorcycle. You can even drop yourself into a sitting position. The more you stay forward toward the gas tank, the less chance of the seat coming up and hitting you in the tail end. If you're doing this in the woods, or maybe you're coming out of a creek, for instance, and it's real rutted, the same type of technique is involved. You want to make sure that you keep the front end as light as possible. Try and keep the front end out of the ruts. Keep a little power. Maintain a forward momentum when you're coming up out of the ruts. Again, finger on the clutch. Look where you're going. Head over the front end. Arms out away from your body. Loft the front end as soon as you possibly can. Try and get it over as much of the rut as you possibly can so it doesn't have to follow it all the way through. Drop-offs. Big mistakes that are made on drop-offs, a lot of riders get back too far. They get back too soon on the motorcycle, and when the front end drops, it pulls them over the front end of the motorcycle. When you come up to the top of the drop-off, you should have your weight forward, your head over the front end, your arms slightly bent, and as you go off the drop-off, you still want to maintain that slightly hunched over position so that you're ready for the landing. Your head's right over the front end of the motorcycle. You're able to absorb with the front and the rear end. If you come up the top of the drop-off and get your weight too far back when you go off of there and the front end drops out away from you, what's going to happen to you is you're going to be looking something like this. Your weight's going to be way back. If the back end kicks up too much, it's going to throw you over the handlebars. Your arms are locked in too much. Well, looking at the two different riding positions, maybe you ask yourself, which position would you rather be in? The position on the top row going from left to right, or the position on the bottom row going from right to left? Well, when going off drop-offs, be sure you don't sit down. Make sure you don't have your arms drop down too low, and make sure you're not sitting too straight upright. It's also a good idea to make sure you got your finger on the clutch so you get the loft. When you land in the bottom of that creek, you don't want to be sitting down. It's going to bounce you. It's going to give you too much of a jolt. Besides being sure that you're not sitting down when you go off of there, make sure you loft the front end of the motorcycle. Otherwise, you're going to end up going right over the handlebars. Particularly if it's anything more than a 1 or a 2 foot drop-off, you don't want to be landing on the front wheel. How about uphills? Boy, there's a lot of things to know about uphills. Mostly keeping your weight forward going up the hill, keeping your hand on the clutch, keeping your head over the front end of the motorcycle, and know the hill that you're trying to go up. You don't always make it up all hills either. But if you're going to climb those hills, be sure that you're using your body a lot, because you really have to work the bike going up some of the real steep uphills. If you don't make it all the way to the top, turn around real quick. Turn around and go back down to the bottom. Don't wait till the bike stalls and starts rolling back down the hill and comes over on top of you. Make an immediate U-turn, if at all possible. Turn and go right back down the hill again. Keep your weight well forward, as much forward as you possibly can on the motorcycle. Keep your arms up, your head over the front end of the motorcycle, and remember to slip your clutch a little bit when you're going up the hill. Don't turn the RPMs up too high. You want the tire to track rather than spin going up the top of the hill. You don't have to go as hard and as fast as most riders think. Again, once you start up that hill and you find you're not going to make it, stop the motorcycle, get it sideways in the hill, turn the front end around, look where you're going to go so you know exactly where you're going to go, and don't get yourself in trouble going down the hill. Get your foot on the brake, use both brakes real easy, slide the back end around a little bit by using the rear brake, get it pointed in the direction that you want. Keep your head over the front end of the motorcycle and look where you're going. Again, make sure that your finger is on the clutch the entire time and that you keep your weight as far forward as possible. Some people think the important thing is traction. The important thing is that the front end doesn't come up, that you don't wheelie and have to shut off the power to where you lose all your momentum going up the hill. And speaking of hills, how about this little hill? If you want to try some big hills, this one requires a lot of forward momentum, a lot of speed to get up the top of it, because there's no traction whatsoever going up a hill this steep. So you want to be sure that you get a good drive at the bottom, you know the exact line and where you're going, that you keep your weight forward, and you definitely keep your finger on the clutch the entire time. Take a good look at the hill. If you're out with somebody else, talk it over with them and figure out what the best line is. Knowing your line on this hill is really important because you don't want to be going backwards down this one. Make sure you get a good straight line at the hill and don't get on the power too soon and get squirrely. And when you get to the hill, squat yourself down, look up the hill, pick your line, and be able to stay with it all the way up the hill. You don't want to miss that line. Pre-jumping over the top is good, missing the last part of it. However, sometimes the front end will tend to get a little bit high in the air. If it does, pull in the clutch a little bit, apply the rear brake, and as soon as the bike goes back to the side of the hill, it'll throw the front end down rather than looping over backwards. When you're going up hills in the woods, don't always run straight up the ruts. Sometimes the ruts are so deep that they'll catch the foot pegs. It's not a bad idea to try different lines, different than what everyone else is using. For instance, jump across the rut rather than riding in it. Use a little imagination. Try different lines, and it will improve your riding a great deal. Downhills. Go slow on the downhills. Don't try and go really fast. Don't be afraid of putting your foot down once in a while. Stay loose, stay relaxed, use both brakes. Don't ever lock up the front wheel brake. Make sure that you use the front brake real easy. If you got to touch your foot going down a rut, do it, but try to keep your right foot on the foot peg the entire time where you don't have to lose control of the rear brake, because you don't want to pick up too much speed. It's difficult. Once you pick up speed, it's hard to get the bike to slow down again. So try and maintain a slow speed as much as possible. If you're trying to get out of a rut, don't be afraid. Plant your foot. Pick the front end up. Get it out of the rut. If the bike starts picking up a little bit too much speed, or if you want to change your line, go ahead and lock up the rear brake a little bit. Slide the rear end around so that you can get the bike pointed in the direction that you want to go. Remember, your arms aren't locked in. You're back on the motorcycle a little bit with your rear end, but yet your head is still over the front end of the motorcycle the entire time. This is whether you're going uphill or downhill. Leave your arms loose, extend your arms as much as you possibly can, but always keep a slight bend in them when you're going downhill. Remember, don't lock up the front wheel brake, but if you need to, lock up the rear end of the motorcycle so that you can slide the back end of the bike around and change the direction. If you want to move over a little bit to the right or a little bit to the left, you can do it by sliding the bike sideways going down the hill. It's always best to stand up going downhill rather than to try and sit down, particularly for the abrupt impact at the bottom. You don't want to be sitting where you're going to feel that impact when you hit down in the bottom part. Keep your finger on the clutch, make sure the bike doesn't stall. If you're going to try climbing some uphills, be sure and choose a good line. You don't want to get up there and hit something about halfway up the hill, but if you do, make sure that you get the bike turned sideways, get off it as quick as you possibly can. Try and get around and get on the high side of the motorcycle. Then what you want to do is you want to take and turn the bars a little bit and work the front end so that you get the bike totally sideways in the hill. If you walk the front end back and forth, it'll let the front end come down. As soon as you get it pointed down the hill, get yourself lined up, jump on the motorcycle, take off, and go. Don't try and bulldog the motorcycle down the hill the entire way with your walking alongside the motorcycle. Remember, don't lock your arms in. Keep a slight bend in them all the time. Work on finding steeper and steeper hills to build your confidence. Sometimes you don't want to run straight down the hill either, because you'll pick up entirely too much speed. Sometimes what you want to do is you want to get on the hillside and work back and forth across the hill whenever you're coming down. But keep your speed as slow as you possibly can, particularly because if it's abrupt at the bottom, you don't want to get down and bottom the suspension out. Try and stand up the entire time. Work the front wheel. Don't just try and hold it in a straight line. Remember about sliding the rear end of the bike around if you need to change your direction a little bit. When you get to the real steep downhills, look at it just for a second before you go down it. Pick a good line, make sure you know where you're going, because you sure don't want that front end to catch something and the front end to turn on you and flip over the bars. Again, there's always that slight bend in your arms when you're coming downhill. Fingers should remain on the clutch the entire time. Don't be afraid to let your weight get over the front end of the motorcycle a little bit on a downhill. A lot of people want to stay way too far back. You know, downhills are not really as much of a problem as most people think they are. Really, it's just a straightaway that the angle's been changed on it. So just relax and treat it that way. And if you come to that downhill with those tree roots on it, well, keep your hand on the clutch, keep your head forward, stay loose, relax, hit them straight on, don't hit them at a 45-degree angle, and there's no problem there either. Well, here's one we've probably all experienced, the surprise ditch in the middle of the trail. How do you get over it? How do you get through it smoothly? How do you keep from crashing into it? First, when you get there, it's a good idea to make sure you don't loft the front end too high. Here Johnny is showing us a technique where you wheelie up to the bank. You wheelie long before you ever get there. This will keep the bike going level all the way across and not allow the back end to drop down as long as you have good momentum. Most riders get to the bank. As soon as the front wheel goes off the first side, they pull the front end up, which sucks the back end down and hits the face of the other side. Then throwing the front end down, kicking the back end up in the air and wanting to throw the rider forward. There are many different techniques to get across there. Here David demonstrates the same, where you loft the front end of the motorcycle, do a wheelie across, the back end never gets a chance to drop into the hole because he has good forward momentum going across. Now another technique that can be used is keeping the bike basically level, staying more in the neutral position with your head forward. Don't pull the front end of the motorcycle up at all. This is about a 15, 16-foot ditch that they're going across. However, with their momentum, the bike will carry all the way across. The bank is exactly the same height on both sides. And Johnny demonstrates the same technique, keeping the bike as level as possible. Remember, if you pull the front end up, it's going to drop the back end down, which is going to force it into the bank on the other side. As you can see, the banks are pretty much the same height on both sides, so there's not really any kind of a launching ramp, but yet the bikes don't hit on the bank on the other side due to the fact that they're not pulling the front end up extremely high. Well, how about an off-camber? They always tend to be a little bit tricky, whether they're on a motocross track or whether they're out in the trails. Well, the main things you want to know about this, in order to make them easier to ride, is load the outside foot peg. Keep your weight on the outside of the seat. Keep your upper part of your body leaned into the hillside. Keep your outside arm out away from your body and keep 1 or 2 fingers on the clutch in case you encounter a problem there. Make sure that you work the front end of the motorcycle all the way across the off-camber. If you do that, the wheel will tend to keep trying to climb up the off-camber. If not, it will drift down from the off-camber and you won't be on the side of the hill anymore. Keep your head over the front end. Work the front wheel. It's very important. If you're standing, you have both feet on the pegs. Load your outside foot peg. Work the bike constantly. If you're sitting, keep your leg extended. And remember, never make a radical acceleration change on an off-camber. Hey, how about climbing some of those tricky uphills? How about impressing your friends with this one? You know, the hills that look like there's no way you can get up because the last part's straight up or it's got a lip on the top of it and there's no way you're ever going to get up there? Well, we use something called a pre-jump. Now, that's where you go in and compress the suspension into a small bump before you ever get to the top. Now, it could be a dip in the side of the hill. It could be a rock. There's many things that can get you to pre-jump. And what the idea is to get the bike leveled out as much as possible when you go over the top, to jump the last 5, 6, 8, 10 feet, depending on the particular hill that you're going over. Get your weight in the neutral position so the front and the rear wheel clear the top and never touch. Now, as you go into it, what you want to do is come in and compress your body slightly as the suspension compresses. Keep your weight as much forward as you possibly can when you go over the jump. When the suspension rebounds, what you're going to want to do is get the front end out and down away from you and lighten the rear end of the motorcycle. Lighten up on the seat and lighten up on the foot pegs. So as we watch David coming in here, what we're going to see is he's looking at the exact line that he wants to hit. His arms are slightly bent. He goes into the bump that he's going to hit. The suspension compresses. His body compresses. As he comes off of the bump, the front wheel gets over the top of the bump. The rear wheel's still on the bump. The front wheel starts to extend, the front forks start to extend, and the rear end then rebounds. When it rebounds, he keeps his weight forward on the motorcycle, his head still over the handlebars, and lightens up his feet slightly so the bike goes into a level position when he jumps. How about a rock? Do you ever think about going out in the middle of a field where there's nothing out there but two little rocks and playing around with them and find out what you can learn? Well, most people get bored if they just got a flat field. Well, Johnny and David are going to show you some things that they do to amuse themselves sometimes, like taking this rock and kicking the back end of the bike out, learning to turn the motorcycle with the rear end up in the air at about a 90-degree angle or better, learning to do wheelies over rocks, finding out how the rocks are going to react whenever you run into them, doing a wheelie and kicking the front end over. There's a lot of things that you can do to have fun with a couple of rocks. Most people never think about it. They think they have to have hills or trails or something to ride on. That's not necessarily true. As you approach your rocks, if you want to kick the back end out, approach them just slightly to the opposite side of the side that you're going to go onto. Look at the rock, keep your fingers on the clutch. Then turn. Turn the wheel slightly so that you're starting to go around the rock and your front wheel is just barely going to clear the rock. What you're going to try and do is get your rear tire to hit this rock. When it hits the rock, the suspension will rebound. When it does, bring your weight forward and also throw your hips out to the side slightly, turning the bike, pointing it in a different direction, letting out the clutch and riding away. Now, some other techniques that you can use to have fun is learning to wheelie into a rock. Wheelie into the rock, and then when the suspension compresses, what you're going to do is you're going to take and throw your weight forward and land more onto the front tire. It's important when the suspension kicks, in order to do this, that you throw your weight forward and again lighten up the foot pegs slightly. Loft the front end, suspension hits, throw your weight forward. Or you can go into a wheelie, hit the rock, and remain in a wheelie. In order to do that, you'll want to keep your weight more located on the foot pegs. Don't throw your weight so far forward. Keep your weight more upright as though you were going off of a jump and trying to keep the front end high. Or you can try this one. Take two rocks and try and jump from one rock to the other. And when you hit the second rock, lay the bike over slightly and kick the back end around and make that direction change. There's a lot of fun you can have with two rocks out in the middle of the field, as you can see these guys are doing. Well, before we watch Johnny and David doing the things that they enjoy most when they're out riding, let's take a minute and recap the things that we've just seen in this video. For instance, wheelies. All the things we're going to be looking at in this recap are going to be taken in a clockwise direction, starting at the top left-hand corner. For instance, wheelies. When you get ready to loft the front end of the motorcycle, make sure that you bring the motorcycle to a complete stop. Compress the forks. When the forks rebound, at the same time, be sure to apply your clutch and the throttle. Don't give it too much throttle. Use your clutch quickly, but with too much throttle, it's going to tend to go over backwards. Make sure you keep your foot on the rear brake the entire time that you're riding, so that you don't go over backwards. Bring the bike up to a 45-degree angle, and remember you're using the brake against the throttle the whole time. Enjoy yourself, have fun when you're doing it, and remember, make it a slow wheelie, not a horsepower wheelie. Defensive riding, that's being loose the entire time that you're riding. Remember, riding on those banks, can help you a great deal. And the techniques to this is loft the front end, go into your wheelie. Once you're into the wheelie, put your front wheel up on the bank. Keep it within about 18 inches, 12 to 18 inches from the top ledge on the bank. Lean your weight toward the inside. Keep your fingers on the clutch. Keep the rear wheel spinning the whole time. Remember, if you lean your weight toward the outside, what's going to happen is the bike's going to want to tip over toward the inside, and you're going to fall off of the bank or you're going to tip over. Remember, try your one-handed riding to help build your confidence a little bit, but you must lean to the inside of the corner, and if you're riding one-handed, you must lean a little bit more toward the inside, but you have to keep your body working. Use your body a lot in the hip area. Proper body positioning for trail riding. Proper body positioning is really important. Remember, whether you're going downhill, uphill, or riding on the flat, your head still remains over the front end of the motorcycle and your arms stay slightly bent. When you're going downhill, remember, look where you're going, keep your finger on the clutch, keep your arms slightly bent and your legs slightly bent the whole time. If you're climbing across ruts, be sure you be loose and you use your body to work the motorcycle the entire time. Picking your way in and out of trees. You must be loose. You cannot be too loose on the motorcycle. The looser grip that you have, the better it is. And your grip is very important, how you grip the throttle. Don't hold your bars too tight. Don't keep your arms at a 90-degree angle to the handlebars. Keep your arms pitched out to the side slightly whenever you're riding. And this goes for whether you're standing or whether you're sitting, this hunched over position. Remember, when you're climbing those logs, don't let yourself get thrown over the front end of the motorcycle. Don't loft the front end too high. Loft the front end, set it over the top. When the back end kicks, move your weight forward at the same time. Don't hit your logs at an angle. Hit the logs as straight on as you possibly can, and never accelerate hard when your rear wheel is hitting into the log. When you're climbing up banks, remember, it's a lot like climbing over logs. Again, you must use your clutch. In most all techniques that you're doing, you must use your clutch at all times. Keep your weight slightly forward. When you get ready to do the loft, remember, compress your suspension. When the suspension compresses, it'll rebound. And when you compress your suspension, do it with the rear brake, not with the front brake. The front brake reacts too quick. When you impact into the bank, remember to bring your weight forward as the suspension kicks up so it doesn't come up and hit you in the tail and want to throw you over the handlebars. Stay loose, stay relaxed. When you come to the top of the bank, you can stand up or you can be sitting down as long as your weight is forward. Drop-offs. Remember, when you get to the drop-off, don't stretch out too far to the back before you go off the drop-off, because once the bike goes into the air, the front end is going to have a tendency to want to fall on you. And if it goes onto the nose and you're stretched too far back because your arms are extended too straight, it's going to want to pull you over the front end of the motorcycle. Besides, the back end of the motorcycle could kick up and want to throw you over the front end. Stay in your slightly hunched over position. Be sure you are standing when you go off of all drop-offs. You don't want to be sitting down. If you're sitting down, you're not going to be able to absorb the impact down in the bottom. And make sure when you go off of all drop-offs that you loft the front end. Don't depend on the throttle. Use your clutch as well, because if you don't loft the front end, you're going to drop it straight into the nose and you're liable to end up going over the handlebars. Uphills. Look at the uphill. Know exactly where you want to go. You don't want to hit a rock or catch a rut wrong at the beginning of the uphill, because once you lose your momentum, you're not going to go up over the top. Keep your weight as much forward as you possibly can. Many riders think that they want to get to the back of the motorcycle and get more traction going up the hill. You can control the traction by the gear that you're in. You can control it by using your clutch. Most important is don't let the front wheel get too high. If you slide to the back of the motorcycle, the front end will become too light. You want to be sure you keep your weight forward to keep the front end down so that you can maintain a good RPM. And if you don't make it up that hill, remember, don't fight the bike. Don't let it come back over on top of you. Relax. Get the bike side, let it roll backward, get sideways on the hill, turn around, jump on the bike, and ride it back down the hill. When you're going down hills, if you're riding in a rut, It's okay if you put your foot down, but remember, use your left foot. Try and keep your right foot on the foot peg. Keep your hand on the clutch the whole time. You should try to keep the wheel turning as much as you possibly can so that the wheel is tracking as a tractor would be going very slowly, because if you pull in the clutch, it's going to build up speed going down the hill. However, if you need to use your clutch, pull it in to slide the back end of the motorcycle around, possibly to make a direction change. Remember that your weight gets toward the back, but your head is still over the handlebars, over the front end of the motorcycle, in order to keep good control. You don't want to get yourself stretched too far to the back. You want to keep your arms bent the entire time that you're riding. Look where you're going and try and hold that line. Remember, your arms have to be extended so when you get to the bottom, you can absorb the impact. Climbing hills, these are these really steep hills, the one that you got to have a little bit more speed, a little more momentum. There's no traction going up the steep hills like this. Remember, look where you're going, pick your line, do what the suspension does. If the suspension compresses, compress in with it. If it extends, extend with it. You're going to do a little pre-jump possibly at the top of this hill. Remember, keep your weight forward, don't let the front end get too high. Remember, if you don't make it all the way to the top of the hill and you realize you're not going to make it, get off the bike quickly. Get off the bike, try and get on the high side of the motorcycle. Don't wait till it flips over, comes over on top of you, starts rolling backwards quickly. Turn the bike sideways, work the front end, walk it around sideways on the hill. As soon as the bike is pointed down the hill, jump on it and ride it back down to the bottom. Ruts. Now, when you have deep ruts, some of the things that'll really help you are, number one, try and keep the front end as light as you possibly can and keep it up out of the rut. That'll keep the front end from trying to catch in the sides of the ruts and jerk the handlebars out of your hands. Also, by lofting the front end of the motorcycle, it'll allow the foot pegs to get a little bit higher, which will give you a little bit more clearance so that you don't get your feet drug off of the foot pegs. Keep your weight forward, use your clutch, loft the front end, and keep a good momentum all the time. Ditches. Don't make the normal mistake that most riders make. That's where they pull the front end too high going across the ditch. The back end impacts into the other side, throwing the front end down, throwing the rider over the front end of the motorcycle. Make sure that you use one of these two techniques where you wheelie early and you wheelie and you already have the front end high before you get to the ditch, which will allow the back tire to land on the other side, or you keep the bike as level as you possibly can and don't pull the front end up. A good momentum will get you to the other side, and it'll keep the rear wheel from impacting in there and wanting to throw you over the handlebars. Whatever speed you're going, make sure that you have enough response left to where you can snap the throttle so that there's a quick response of the power to help you get across the ditch. Just lean your upper body into the off camber, load the outside foot peg, keep your weight on the outside of the seat if you're sitting down. You can have your inside leg sticking out or on the foot peg. It won't make any difference. Never make a radical acceleration change on an off camber. Be loose, work your bike, and work the front end of the motorcycle the entire time on the off camber. Don't forget about those rocks and how much fun you can have with them. You get out and you start playing with those rocks out in the middle of that field. Learn to do your wheelies over them. Learn to kick the bike out to the side. Learn to jump over the rock and land on the front tire, land on the rear tire. There's a lot of fun you can have with rocks, and most people never ever thought about going out and playing around with rocks in the middle of a field. And as you can see here, with a little imagination, you can improve your riding skills in any type of a riding area. Pre-jumping, remember what that is. That's really being able to jump hills that you never thought you could go up before. And how do you pre-jump? Well, you find the lip that you're going to hit, whether it's that little rut that's in the uphill or whether it's a rock there. As the suspension compresses and it gets ready to rebound. Make sure that you keep your weight well forward. When the back end kicks out, you want to be sure to lighten up the foot pegs slightly. You want to get the bike as level as you possibly can when it comes over the top of the jump. If you get your front end too high, it's going to have a tendency to let the back tire hit on the top of the jump, which is going to throw the front end down and want to throw you over the handlebars. Relax, stay loose, and work and do what the suspension does. Well, you might want to get ready for this one, because here comes Johnny and David, and they're going to show you a lot about pre-jumping, about getting the bike sideways. I think you're going to enjoy this one.
kept it going till the sun fell down. You kept it going.
Oh, hi there. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this last hour. I've sure learned a lot watching Johnny and David out there riding, and well, I found me a little downhill and thought I'd try it. So enjoy yourself when you go riding, have a good time, ride safe, and well, we'll see you later.
Hey guys, got this Dude, so much. Y'all making me laugh.
Hey, I got this new trail riding tape. Want to go out and watch it before we ride?
No, go out and watch it? No.